This is a review of the Lucy Letby case at the end of 2024. It's December now. She spent 3 years in jail already. The inquiry has been going for over 3 months and revealed a lot more evidence since I wrote my book, Is Lucy Letby Innocent?, which I published on the first day of the inquiry, beginning of September 2024, after about a year of research. And already there was so much evidence that there was no evidence. It was all circumstantial, and lots of things have come out. So I'm going to discuss many of the aspects, including, let's start with the expert witness, Dowie Evans, who in a few minutes of reading some notes came to conclusions that the pathologists didn't come to, the coroners didn't come to, the other doctors, the police, nobody else came to. He does seem to be quite a rogue expert witness. He's finished, he's retired, his reputation has no credibility, so he's pretty much finished in any kind of expert witness work. He's even discredited himself by saying that he's changed his opinion, that when he said there was air injected into a nasogastric tube in the nose into the stomach, which milk is put down sometimes, some babies, he said air was injected there. And then he changed that to say no, air was injected directly into the bloodstream. But how can you rely on something for a conviction and that conviction be safe to then later change the thing you were relying on and the conviction still be safe? It's obviously an unsafe conviction. Even if somebody had any doubts about the conviction, whether she was guilty or innocent, whether she harmed anyone, the whole process was so flawed. At the beginning of my research, I didn't know she's guilty or innocent. And actually now, not only am I convinced she's innocent, so many more nurses, midwives, others in similar roles could easily, and sometimes are, accused with wrong allegations, false allegations. Now let's go to the allegations. Maybe I'll come back more to Dowie Evans later. But the allegations by doctors that worked with her are the same people who had to write an apology when she was successful in her personal grievance at work. They were calling her Nurse Death and other things, and whether they were half joking, half serious, they had no evidence, otherwise they would have gone to the police. They spent years not acting. Sometimes it was months, where they thought something had happened and they would go to senior management. And this is like children going to tell mum or dad in a way. These are grown-up doctors on a professional register, and they can't manage to be responsible or able to respond to what they think is somebody harming babies with intention, on purpose, not even just negligently, but maliciously harming babies, and they couldn't go to the police because they were afraid about their jobs, their reputation. But when they got a kind of tipping point of cohesiveness of several of them together, not even necessarily consciously plotting, possibly subconsciously, they wanted to protect their reputations, their unit, and they knew that they were under fire because the Royal College of Child Health had looked and found many things wanting in their unit. One example was when you put an umbilical catheter, that's a tube, into the umbilicus, if you go towards the liver, you have, because the fetal circulation before a baby's born, there's a direct connection of a blood vessel between the umbilicus and the liver, and it's easy to perforate the liver, especially if there's overventilation. That is, the rate is possibly too fast, or the pressure is too high, or the volume is too higher volume. There could be a combination of any of these factors, and there is evidence that we know the rate was extra high than was required and was suitable for some of those extremely vulnerable premature babies who probably should not have been in that unit. They should have been at a more specialised unit. Anyway, so the ventilation's wrong. It's pushed the lungs further down where the diaphragm would be, and if you go in the umbilicus with a tube, you could perforate the liver, and that's exactly what did happen. Now, at first they were saying, oh, there's an unexplained blood clot around the liver. Maybe Lucy Letby punched the baby in the liver. They didn't say punched, but they implied she traumatized the baby's liver with force enough to kill it. I mean, It's absolutely bizarre. And that is from the doctors. It's bizarre what's come from the expert witness, Derry Evans, and one or two people that supported him. At the moment, there's 50 neonatal specialists, all working pro bono, have spent months on very detailed reports, whereas he spent 10 minutes and said, yep, she's guilty, she killed the babies. I don't know who it is, they never told me her name. But he did know. And it's very inconsistent facts or lies or evidence, whatever words we choose to use. So this example of the liver having a blood clot around it, blame that on Lucy. Baby having what appeared to be insulin in them. There's no evidence for that. The blood test results are completely unreliable, and they even say on the blood test results these are completely unreliable. And I know as a clinician and a legal specialist, you need a trend, you need evidence. So what was one test, what's another test? Is it going up, down, stay the same? Was that machine calibrated? Was it tested? Is that exogenous from outside the body insulin? Or was it, as in this case, a C-peptide, a response from the body, because we produce our own insulin, and in these premature babies they're producing insulin in response to stress, to all sorts of factors, including their blood sugar levels, to maintain them. That's what we all do. If it's high or if it's low, we're balancing with insulin. It's such a complex area, and there's other specialists, more specialists than I am, who, some of them retired experts, have come back and they've put their evidence on tape and provided it very clearly, anybody can look up. So there's so many different areas. Looking at the senior management, they never at any time had any evidence that Lucy Letby was harming babies, or they would have gone to the police. In fact, it was the opposite. They made the doctors apologise. Personally, I've supported nurses, midwives and some doctors, and had my own personal grievance employment law cases. I specialised in employment law for some time, and it's quite hard to get a grievance successful in your favour, and Lucy Letby achieved that. And this goes to the motive. She doesn't have a motive to harm babies. The doctors have a motive to harm Lucy Letby. Say that again. Yeah, the doctors have a motive to harm Lucy Letby. So Lucy's being called evil. It's a word that's not very helpful, but if anybody was evil, it's the people who conspired to pervert the course of justice, to commit perjury, to lie under oath, to concoct stories that suit their narrative, their background of protect their reputation. Now, we've seen with other cases, like in the UK, the post office scandal was protect the brand, the reputation of the post office, and they just annihilated hundreds, over 1,000 sub-postmasters, their reputations. They were jailed, they were criminalised. In this case, it's not such a subconscious brand perhaps of the hospital, although there's an element of that. I think it's more about the doctor's reputation. We are consultants, we are doctors, we're up here. They're not really. There's so many levels I've worked with of competent doctors. There's very arrogant and sometimes competent doctors, and there's some who make mistakes more frequently. So intubation is a very difficult thing at 2 a.m. on a busy ward with a very fragile premature baby, and you could cause bleeding. And then to deny that you've done that is just silly. And this is pretty clear what's been going on at the Countess of Chester. There have been errors, there have been mistakes, and they don't hold their hand up and say, yeah, I made a mistake, I can learn from that, or can you come and help us? Can I come to your hospital, have some more training? So just to be called a doctor or even a consultant is more about putting in the years and doing some academic work. It's not always about your clinical skills. And these clinical skills were clearly failing in those doctors. Now the registrars that are working under them, they're working a bit blind, they want to please their master, and they're not really complaining that there's only 1 or 2 ward rounds a week instead of 1 or 2 a day, as is normal and should be the case everywhere else. So I'm just glancing at my book to see what else comes to mind. I mean, coroners, I've seen problems in the Touche case, Touche, it's in the book. A coroner was told by a doctor, nothing to see here. The mother, after childbirth of her twins by caesarean in a private London hospital, She died of a brain hemorrhage. Excuse me. And it was said by the doctor to the coroner, nothing to see here, it was a surprise death, but it's not unnatural. And the coroner made a conclusion and agreed with the doctor. The husband of the woman who had died went to the High Court and overturned the coroner's decision, and the High Court said very clearly coroners must investigate any unexpected death. Now, in the Lucy Letby case, the babies had pathology reports, they had coroner's investigations, and in the Thirlwell inquiry, a retired coroner said all sorts of things, very strange things, things like if he had known that there were concerns about a potential harm being done by a nurse or anybody in the unit, he would have called the police, or at least he thinks he would have called the police. Like, I'm sure that's a certainty. So there are doubts and questions even about the coroners, and one of the problems that I'm quite happy to criticise anybody and everybody, including myself, are the judges. And the woman leading the Thirlwell inquiry, Dame Thirlwell, they may not be consciously malicious or corrupt, but they are, in their actions, completely corrupting this process by failing to be logical. For example, if you're logical, that would be, let's look at all the facts. Was there anybody else investigated? Was there any other potential harm being done to the babies through medical negligence, through hospital lack of resources, the sanitation, the sewage problem that the hospital had backing up in the sinks, and various bacterias that do get into these very fragile premature babies. So the whole system, the police, the Crown prosecution, the barrister working for the defence, very much manipulated the evidence. They've excluded information and from the jury, and they've directed the jury down some wrong paths. Not about fairness, not about justice, not about honesty or facts, just about winning their case. And it will be bringing egg on their face when Lucy Letby is exonerated, as is inevitable at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. Which brings me to, there is the appeal. The CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, a very dysfunctional organisation that was set up by a Home Secretary many years ago in the wake of several other miscarriages of justice, the Guildford 4, the Birmingham 6. They took a very long time, very huge number of years to release innocent people. So we hope that's not the case for Lucy Letby. And I think there's a great number of people, myself included, Private Eye, Richard Gill, the statistician, somebody's made even humorous videos on YouTube singing songs from Dewey or Dowie Evans' point of view. And that satire kind of shows where we are at. It is so ridiculous, this case. The facts against Lucy were never proven. There are no facts. There is no evidence. That is evidence of a miscarriage of justice. And there is now so much, not just support for her that's like emotional support, but factual specialist support from statisticians, neonatologists, haematologists, radiologists, pathologists. I think probably some coroners and other lawyers, and certainly Mark MacDonald, the barrister presenting the case. So he's going to the CCRC, which I said is dysfunctional, but they may act more quickly with this because of the public pressure. I think even the Court of Appeal previously indicated some of the evidence was a bit unsafe from one of the doctors in particular, Ravi Jairam. You may know him from some other media things, and he has a pop group. And when he was a consultant at the unit, he was quite busy with his media and music career. And that may be why he wasn't attending the unit so often. He's the one who says he lays awake at night regretting that he'd done something. That is criminally negligent. If Lucy Letby had genuinely harmed the babies, then all the doctors, including him particularly, and Stephen Breary, should be liable, should be having cases against them, civilly and or criminally, both probably, by the parents, by others, for failing to act. But managed to lose my thought there about Jairam. It's very messy, and it's amazing that there's no spotlight on them. The police are focused on one innocent young woman, nurse, put her in jail because it fit their story. And we've seen so many other cases. I've studied miscarriages of justice. There's one, Stephen something's in the book, 27 years in jail because he held a dying woman who was bleeding in a graveyard, had her blood on him, got sent to jail, and they later found out he didn't do it. 27 years. And there's so many other miscarriages of justice cases built on assumption, but once the ball gets rolling, nobody will stop and say, is this logical? Is it rational? Are there any facts? In Lucy's case, is there any motive? There's clearly no motive, there's no evidence. But we've got circumstantial evidence. It's enough to convict her. The amount of money spent on this case, so 4 million for the trial, 1.5 for the defence, 2.5 for the prosecution, from what I've read. Then 9 million, if that's correct, sounds crazy, for the Thirlwell inquiry. So, huge number, and this is a neonatal unit that could not afford to have clean water and proper plumbing, or employ a few extra staff, or agency staff, locum doctors or anything. And now money is thrown at it after the event. And this happened in the maternity reviews of other neonatal maternity units, where a large number of preventable deaths and serious injuries to mothers and babies in the UK, like Sheffield, East Kent, Quim Taff, Cardiff in Wales, in the Midlands, Mid Staffordshire, all these others where huge amounts of preventable deaths. For example, one of them was around 50 babies that could have been saved. No criminal prosecution, nobody looking at it. What is the difference between, say, corporate negligent manslaughter, gross negligent manslaughter, and the Lucy Letby case? It's an open question. What is the difference? Why is nobody prosecuted when it's a hospital failing, but when they can find an individual? And for me, it seems to go back to the witch burning, witch hunting, scapegoating. We want to have a good guy and we want to have a bad guy. Often the good guy becomes a bad guy. Oh look, the really nice, kind nurse. Oh no, she's not, she's evil. So we play games with the narrative, with the story. It seems to be a human, I don't know what it is, something that people do. Why do they do it? Because they can. They won't if they can't. So we need people to get on board with the defence. I welcome people to have criticisms, questions, disagree. Just looking at my own findings, there's so much that's come out since and during the Thirlwell inquiry, which will conclude, I think, early next year. Yeah, so there's a fair bit in this, but really there's enough for a second book, which I may well put together now.